Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our ongoing study in Paul and the Faithfulness of God by N.T. Wright, published by Fortress Press in 2013. We're going to take a look at a lesson in pages 155 to 175. It's going to look at the Jewish concept of double return, and it's a powerful way of understanding that Saul was situated in the in-between time of the first return to Jerusalem and then the promised coming of the doxa glory to the temple, of the true return. So it's a concept of double return. Let's begin by taking a look at block 1 on the left. We've got the double return from elongated exile in Tobit 13:5 and Deuteronomy 32. There will be a return and rebuilding of the temple. That was the first return. But then comes the second return of the times of fulfillment and the real true return in the splendor of doxa glory, where all nations will worship the true God. So there had been a return of sorts, but the promises of Isaiah still needed fulfillment. Therefore, Paul, prior to his conversion, was living in the in-between times, awaiting the true return of the doxa glory that would abide and reside in the temple. Apocalyptic literature was taken up at this time. In Enoch, the first return is followed by a period of further suffering. Then at last the Messianic kingdom arrives. Israel is rescued and enjoys world sovereignty. In Jubilees, the elongated exile will only end at God's eschaton, and in Ezra, Roman oppression will not come to an end until the time of the Messiah, the Messianic age. In the Testament of Levi, elongated exile will remain until the new priest arises, and in the Testament of Judah, elongated exile continues until the Messiah comes as the star from Jacob. Also, the Rabbi Joshua in the late 1st century stated that the great true return had not yet occurred. So this late testimony from the Rabbi Joshua stated that the great true return of the doxa glory had not yet occurred. Let's move on to block 2 and take a look at the qualifications of the double return theory. Ben Sirach writes, the tabernacling presence of the doxa glory is equated with the Torah wisdom. There was a substitution of, maybe it's the Torah wisdom that is the doxa glory now. But there are still prophecies in need of fulfillment. In the book of Judith, the Jews have already come back from where they had been scattered. And in the book of Maccabees, even after the victories of Judas, many promises still await fulfillment, especially Deuteronomy 30, because there is a double return of sorts in the fact that Israel will be both rescued and then there will be the gathered ingathering within God's doxa glory. So they have been rescued out of Babylonian captivity in the first return by Cyrus of Persia. However, they had not yet seen the return of the divine doxa glory. In fact, the temple was corrupt. Now in block 3, we take a look at how the Pharisees addressed this lack of the returning doxa glory in the sign of intensification. There were the Syria synagogue paintings, and those depicted the defeat of the Roman Empire and the rescue of Israel through a messianic second Moses. They became paintings of promise and functioned as signs of the promised deliverance of Israel out from under oppression. Therefore, says Wright, the Jewish people in the 1st century were eager for signs, eager for signs of the coming messianic age. Qumran itself at the Dead Sea became the sign of secret post-exilic restoration. They were the protest community. Qumran was a protest community protesting Roman corruption of the temple. Now, the ongoing corruption of the Jewish Hasmonean regime did force the Jews to extend the Daniel prophecy of judgment. The judgment of Daniel took on a new signification against wicked pagans, but also wicked Jewish rulers. The Hasmonean dynasty was definitely corrupt. They actually were in alignment with the secular Roman governorship. They paid for the office of high priest. It was an extremely corrupt Hasmonean dynasty. Now, the Pharisees took up a new signification consisting of Torah intensification. The Pharisees in the first century dealt with this lack of return of doxa glory by strongly emphasizing a Torah intensification. And they reread Deuteronomy and they reread Daniel. The partial restorations of Ezra and the partial restoration depicted in Nehemiah needed to move forward to true messianic return for the Pharisees. They still looked for political, true messianic return. They wanted the more political deliverance as their approach to salvation. Salvation was a consummation of creation as new creation. Therefore, the Pharisees possessed a new creation anticipation, and their personal salvation meant being a part of the coming messianic age. The eschaton was a restoration of justice for the Pharisees that would be a universal rule throughout all creation. And so they were looking for the return of the doxa glory as a political messianic return. But in the meantime, they were practicing Torah intensification. So there was this sense of a double return. There was a sense of a fact that, yes, we were liberated by Cyrus of Persia. We have returned to Jerusalem. However, it is corrupt. There is a corruption of the temple. There is the corrupt Hasmonean dynasty, and they are extremely corrupt. They actually have bargained financially for the role of high priest, and Qumran even evolves as a protest community. So from here we want to take a look at the additional teaching in this lesson on the new interpretations of the parousia second return. So let's look at the triad on the right. Let's take a look at the Western misinterpretations of parousia. The first century language was situated in a context of political turmoil, and Wright says we must negate the liberal, spiritualized accounts of resurrection. The first century Jews posited the book of Daniel into a relentless, worldly end, a this world ending, a this worldly messianic age. So apocalyptic metaphors must be interpreted through the lens of the Jewish worldview of a creation moving toward new creation, says Wright. Additionally, we must remember that Paul's covenant lineage as a Pharisee consisted of the very concrete lineage of Elijah, Phinehas, Judas Maccabeus, and the Shammai split of the Pharisees. And all of that meant political restoration for Paul prior to his conversion. Adams took apocalyptic language as referring to ekpyrosis, the destruction of the world by fire. This end of the world theme became dominant in Western interpretations. The need arose for proper exegesis. The need arose for proper and right Jewish perspective, says N.T. Wright. And that's why he's trying to clearly define first century Jewish identity for Paul prior to conversion. So let's move on and take a look at that proper exegesis in Block 2. And Wright takes up Card's Biblical Language, his book on biblical language and signification, which took up Jeremiah and the reference to chaos or krizomorphe, the need of form, a chaotic city of Jerusalem that was in need of form. Jeremiah writes that God declares that he will not make a complete destruction. It'll be a partial rebuke, not a complete destruction. So Wright says if we look at Jeremiah 4:23 through 28, the land will become a desolation, but not a full, complete ending. And that fulfilled the 598 BC event where Babylon captured Jerusalem under Nebuchadnezzar. And then you've got Joel 3, where the sun and the moon are darkened, and that meant that Jerusalem will be rescued by a mighty divine cosmic act. So that leaves the following, says N.T. Wright. We are left with, first of all, the first moment of a krizomorphe. During Israel's elongated exile, they were in need of divine form and divine reshaping of the doxa glory, of the returning doxa glory of God. There was a partial destruction in their slavery to Rome under Roman occupation, but it wasn't complete destruction. So they were in need of a divine form shaping to the chaos they were living under. Now in Joel, the darkening of the cosmos posits the coming of the divine renewal act. And so we get a great look at how apocalyptic literature was looking for this second return and how significant it was as the answer to the elongated exile under Roman oppression. That takes us on to Block 3. We've got the carryover inserted triad of the in-between times. Israel's oppression by Rome was an elongated exile within their own land. The previous return left many promises still open. Then there's the Block 2, the rescue and an ingathering. The final ingathering of God's people in doxa glory was still awaited. And therefore, in Block 3, there was an eagerness for signs of the Messianic age. Paul's mental state included looking for signs of the restoration under the Messianic age. As a Pharisee, he took up Torah intensification in order to anticipate the coming Messianic age. So we look at this Block 3, re-evaluating parousia. Daniel 9 was taken as pointing to a world ruler who would rise up out of Judea. Daniel was taken up as the true prophet of the first century. For Ezra took up Daniel's eagle and lion vision and posited a judgment against Rome through messianic leadership of God's people. And then 2 Baruch moved through Daniel's 4 kingdoms and posited messianic universal dominion that would finally be reached. And Ezra 5 posited the apocalyptic unfolding of the concrete existence. Apocalyptic literature actually referred to concrete actual events, but they also functioned as signs, as warning metaphors to the Jewish people, because worship was immersed in corruption. Priesthood was contaminated fully by corruption. That's why the Qumran community was a voluntarily exiled community protesting temple corruption. So we get great teaching here from N.T. Wright on this concept of double return and how Saul, prior to his conversion, he was living in this tension of the return to Jerusalem, yes, but not yet the return of God's doxa glory. And he was living as a Pharisee under Torah intensification as a substitute for doxa glory. He was living under a counterfeit interpretation of doxa glory because of the great frustration that after all of this time they were still under Roman oppression. So the double return concept and idea developed within first century Judaism. But through apocalyptic literature, we learn that there is going to be the coming true return, and it's going to be Messianic age. Saul was looking for the breaking in of the Messianic age. It was going to be an apocalyptic breaking in of a inaugurated Messianic age, a time of eschatological time, living out the teleosis of living toward the kingdom of God, and the vertical breaking in of the Messianic age through the soon-to-come Messiah, whereas Qumran called him the soon-to-come teacher of righteousness. They named this Messianic world ruler as the teacher of righteousness at Qumran. Great teaching here, powerful teaching. We are going to have a little summary triad this time also. I think it's important that we do that. We've got really a terrific little summary triad that I want to present also, and that will update Israel's timeline for us too. So it'll give us, I think, a good little addition. And we'll wrap this one up, and we'll take a look at that recall triad.